This is Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, the co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You know who he is. I believe one of Bill's most innovative ideas was something he called Think Week. Every year, Bill Gates would block out a week of his schedule and take a helicopter up to a secluded cabin in the Pacific Northwest to have an entire week to himself to read, think, and reflect. Then he would come back and share his ideas with Microsoft's leadership team. Some of his ideas would spark new initiatives within the organization. This became a grassroots part of Microsoft's company culture. Now, none of us are running multi-billion-dollar companies, but a huge part of living a better life is making sure your life is going in the direction you want it to be going. And this is where Think Week comes in for you and I. A Think Week is a tool that can be modified to fit within the confines of your current life situation, as long as it includes these three key ingredients. Number 1, seclusion. Number 2, reflection. And number 3, application. I've been doing a Think Week for the last 4 years, and the actual practice of doing the Think Week has been different each year, but the result has been very similar. Each time I've walked away with a renewed sense of purpose and a clarity of life direction that I haven't been able to find in any other way. The first phase of a Think Week is to plan ahead. I would say at least a month in advance if possible. Think Week doesn't need to be a wide open week. You don't need to take PTO for it. You don't need to go to a cabin in the Pacific Northwest unless you want to. Adjust it to fit your current life situation. This has varied for me. Some years it's been just sitting in my office for a few hours before the day starts, reflecting and preparing for the coming year. One year, my Think Week looked like a 2.5-day retreat at a camp in the middle of winter. As long as it's creating an environment of seclusion for you to reflect, that is what's important here. So this year, I didn't set aside enough time for a full dedicated Think Week. So what I'm doing instead is setting aside 3 hours each morning from 6 to 9 a.m. for 5 days in a row, just to close myself in my office and work through my Think Week. To do this deeply, this does take some time. And so I would plan on 5 days if it's available to you, but of course, adjust according to your own needs. There's just something about being able to get deep into the problems and ideas that is very helpful and very unusual from our regular pace of life. If you're in a spot in your life where you absolutely don't have time to do a Think Week, I would consider doing this on a smaller scale. Something like a Think Day. Maybe you set aside 5 to 6 hours to go to a coffee shop and work through it, or rent a cabin overnight, or even just a hotel room, just to replicate this same process, but just at a smaller scale that fits into your life right now. When you're planning your Think Week, try to make sure that this is actually a good time, a time when work won't be extra demanding, a time that is okay to step away from any family responsibilities you have, so that you can fully immerse yourself in this and not be worrying about life outside of your Think Week. I know this isn't always in our control, but it's the idea that counts. In the weeks leading up to Think Week, take notes on some of the things that come into your mind that you want to explore during Think Week. So I wanted to give you an idea of the topics I'm going to be covering in this year's Think Week, because without concrete examples, this whole idea of a Think Week can feel pretty nebulous sometimes. My philosophy is to start broad when I'm writing down my ideas, just get everything out on the paper and then narrow down, so that I can get down to a less but better approach. This Think Week, I'm going to focus on 3 key areas. Number 1 is big picture and goals. This is time where I spend looking at my values. I look ahead to my 10-year plan and tweak and adjust that as my life has continued to change. And then I look ahead to next year's goals and start planning that deeply. Number 2 is lifestyle design. So this is basically making sure my life is in alignment with where I want it to be in a daily life kind of way. So thinking about, what does my ideal week look like? What about my ideal day? Plans for basically just how I function in life thinking about things like financial management, maybe some personal growth things I want to do. Number 3 is business. So this is where I will end up spending the most time. There are 2 areas I want to look at. Number 1 is thinking about tools and skills I might need to learn in the next year. For example, I want to take a deep look at AI and figure out how I need to adapt to that in my industry, video production. Is there anything I need to do or change or adjust or integrate? And is there anything I need to learn in the next year to stay up to date in that area? The second element is business direction. So if you've been following along from the beginning of this channel, you know that I left my full-time job in April to go back to full-time video production, doing corporate and commercial work. And pretty quickly I realized, wait a minute, I don't like where this industry's going. I'd like to pivot and adjust. And so what you're watching right now is part of that pivot. My only goal in this was to upload 1 video every single week for a year. It's been 5 months and I have that rhythm set pretty well. And so now it's time to look at like, what's next? What do I want to actually do with this? Like building some systems and thinking very deeply about a decision to monetize or not monetize this channel in a way that aligns with my values as a person and viewer first, and then as a business person and creator who needs to earn a living second. Another element of preparing for your Think Week is to prep food ahead of time. Bill Gates had a caretaker come in and bring him meals every day. We probably can't do that, and so prep your food ahead of time because that takes quite a bit of mental effort and time out of your Think Week. The second phase here is actually doing it. So in this part, I want to talk about a few things that help facilitate seclusion and reflection. The first step in this process is to limit your intake of information and distraction. This is so important. For me, that means no news, no YouTube, no social media, no notifications, that's off. My phone is tucked away in a drawer. I am totally focused except for designated times of the day. The second element of this is taking care of yourself physically. So there's 2 big elements to this. Number 1 is sleep. Just making sure, especially on your Think Week, that you are getting enough sleep, 7 to 9 hours a night, depending on your personal needs, is so important because if you're walking around in a fog all day from lack of sleep, you are not going to be able to think deeply. The second element of this is studies have shown that we work so much better when we actually take breaks and go outside and walk. So I do a lot of solitary walking, no headphones, no nothing. And I just go out and don't think about my idea, and I'm amazed how frequently ideas will pop into my head or a solution to a problem I've been working on while I'm out walking, not directly thinking about it. Another key here is making sure you have a designated time to check in with loved ones, check your phone, make sure things are okay there, but not to get sucked into scrolling or news or emails or that kind of thing. So once you've done all of this hard work, this thinking, this processing, you've gone deep, now we need to synthesize everything into something that can be translated out into the world. A big part of Bill Gates' Think Week was summarizing everything he took away from his week into a document and sharing it with Microsoft's leadership team. I would plan to do this in some capacity for yourself. Summarize it down into what you found, and so you have something concrete to take away from Think Week. For me, I've emerged from each Think Week with a reassured sense of direction and purpose. I think this is the one time of the year that I truly feel very strongly about this is the direction I want my life to be going, and here is how I'm going to get there. And taking the time to do that and actually knowing where you want to go is so incredibly important and hard to do. So if you haven't done a Think Week, I would encourage you to consider doing it if your life allows. Even if it's just a small version of a Think Week, just taking time to step back and reflect on your life and look at where you want to be going can be so incredibly helpful.